Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's public hearing. We welcome you, and for those in the audience, we welcome your attendance and participation. Madam Clerk, do you mind providing the roll call for today?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Steve Leonardis. Councilmember Marcia Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Barbara Spector.
Here.
Vice Mayor Rob Rennie.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Mariko Sayak.
Here. Okay, so at this time, I would like to introduce to you and ask a young lady to join me up front. Her name is J. Lee Harrell. So for those of you that watch our council meetings, and you know that we always introduce a wonderful young student from our community at the beginning of each meeting. And today, you get to meet Jay Lee. She is a 5th grader from Blossom Hill Elementary. And she is a red belt in the art of Taekwondo, so be careful when she's next to me. She loves math, reading, science, art, and running while maintaining a straight A. So that's pretty impressive. But one of the most exceptional things about her, I think this is just the coolest thing. Last year, instead of asking for birthday presents, she asked for contributions to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. That's pretty impressive. And so today she's here to join us and ask all of you to join us as we do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. So let's thank her for joining us today. Walk out with you. And then this is our town attorney and our town manager. Thank you so much for bringing her. So as many of you know, we talk constantly about the wonderful staff that we have within the organization. And today I get to the pleasure of introducing 2 of our departments. Because this month we have National Public Works Week as well as Municipal Clerks Week. So before I begin, I would like to ask Director Morley to join me up front as I quickly read the proclamation for National Public Works Week. And if you have anyone, I'm looking at Ms. Peterson, would you like to join us, please? Okay, so whereas National Public Works Week was instituted as a public education campaign by the American Public Works Association in 1960 and calls attention to the importance of public work in community life. They've proven to be an integral part of our community. As many of you know, not only on sunny days as today, but during stormy weather, they are there 24/7 to make sure that everything, our infrastructure, our roads, everything in our town is safe for our community, and we just can't thank them enough. So on behalf of the town of Los Gatos, I want to thank both of you and your entire staff for all the great work you do for our community.
Thank you very much.
And then now I'm going to ask our Madam Clerk, who does our roll on a regular basis for us. They tend to be on the quiet side, but today I'd like for them to introduce themselves to you. When you enter the front office of our buildings, they are the 3 friendly faces that will greet you. And they really are the engine behind the machine that keeps our town running with things that we don't even think about, from elections to, I'm going to actually read some of the work that they do. They're a time-honored and vital part of local government. the professional link between the citizens, local governing bodies, and agencies of government. And they serve as the information center on functions of local government and community. And so I'm pleased to introduce them. I'm going to let themselves introduce themselves and just ask all of you, if you have time next week to come by our offices, they'll be there and they'll be ready to just kind of go over the work that they do day in and day out for the town and for our community.
Thank you. I'm Shelley Neese, the Clerk Administrator.
Hi, I'm Shannon.
Hi, I'm Linda.
They're the office assistants for the managers in the clerk's office and help do a lot of the work there.
So again, on behalf of the town, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, the council members will share activities that they have done on behalf of the town since our last public hearing. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you. Since our last regularly scheduled council meeting, I attended, along with the mayor, a meeting of the policy committee where we discussed, among other things, possible changes to our below market price policy, some changes to timing with respect to appeals from the Planning Commission, and also visibility standards in the hillside. We're going to be reconsidering all of those at our next policy committee meeting.
Thank you. If you just take a quick look around the chambers, you'll notice that there's new art in here. And so we did have a reception for the Los Gatos Art Association that provides the art for our chambers on a quarterly basis. We also had our Spring into Green event this past weekend, and there was a West Valley managers and mayors meeting where we discuss issues that are of vital concern to the West Valley cities, an interfaith meeting, and today there was a Chamber of Commerce business-to-business luncheon that I attended and got to listen to some of the questions that local businesses have. Thank you. Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. I chaired the executive committee of the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Authority Board on 425, and items discussed included the energy risk management policy and an introduction to a strategic plan that we're working on. Today, I also met with the Silicon Valley Clean Energy CEO to plan the agenda for next week's board meeting, which includes preparing for a closed session focal review of that CEO.
Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since our last meeting, I attended a function honoring members of our volunteer and business communities.
Thank you. At this time, we have our consent agenda. There are 10 items that are on our consent agenda. I have one item, agenda item number 9, that has been pulled. Council members, are there any other items that you wish for further consideration and discussion? Okay. Seeing none, before we move for a motion on the consent, I'm so sorry, Ms. Town Manager. Do you have a manager's report for us today?
I do. Just very quickly, on Saturday, May 6th at 2 p.m., please come to our library. We have Stormtrooper Story Time. There will be free comic books and obviously a Star Wars theme, so everyone's invited. Thank you.
Okay, so item 9 has been pulled from consent. Anyone from the audience would like to pull anything? Seeing that, council members, can I get a motion? Council Member Jensen.
Move approval of the consent calendar, items 1 through 10, exclusive of number 9.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Items 1 through 8 and number 10. And we will now consider item 9, which is approve an exclusive negotiating rights agreement with Presidio Development Partners for a mixed-use parking garage located downtown at 224 West Main Street. Okay.
Thank you and good evening. Matt Morley, Director of Parks and Public Works. This is approval for an ENRA, or an exclusive negotiating rights agreement with Presidio Development Partners for the development of a public parking garage mixed use with residential units, including some below market units that the town is exploring the opportunity for on Main Street, just west of Santa Cruz Avenue. The ENRA allows us to begin negotiations with Presidio and puts both the town and Presidio in a position where we have some stake in the game, some skin in the game, and allows us to begin that negotiation. And Presidio will be able to begin expending dollars on the project in terms of a design and public outreach. In the report, we've highlighted a couple of the important facts that are covered in the ENRA, including a public outreach being front-loaded and extremely critical. So we want to make sure that we engage with all of the stakeholders at the front end. We identify a preliminary design being necessary so that we can identify the scale and magnitude of the project and be able to begin discussions with that in terms of having a picture story to tell with the residents and the other stakeholders. And a couple other important items. The town does retain all the way through the process its rights as the permitting authority. So all along the way, the town has the ability to decide whether or not to continue with the project. We envision the next steps as being the completion of of the ENRA and moving into a future agreement that will allow us to move towards a development project. And hopefully we'll have done that with all of the public outreach so that we have a good communication behind us with the town residents and other stakeholders. There will be some expenses incurred with this. We have expenses with a consultant that we've hired to help us, and we'll have some staff costs as well. Presidio as well will have costs in terms of design costs that will be incorporated into their work for the project. And with that concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Director Morley, any questions? Yes, Councilmember Jensen?
I have a question regarding a provision of the agreement, and it appears at page 5, bottom of page 5 into page 6, section 3.1 of the agreement. And it's referring to essentially the town's discretion to maintain its right to deny the project, approve the project, whatever it might be. I'm looking at the very last sentence, which says, it's not a binding obligation, but then it goes on and says, as such, the town retains absolute discretion before action on a PFA, otherwise known as Pre-Development Facilities Agreement, as necessary to mitigate significant environmental impacts or select other feasible alternatives to avoid significant environmental impacts, or essentially, it looks like our discretion is limited to some kind of significant impact that's identified in an EIR or other environmental document. And is that with respect just to the pre-development facility agreement? I mean, it looks like it's limiting. There's other language that obviously gives the town complete discretion on what to do, but that language struck me as being limited to environmental impacts, so I was curious about the effect of that.
Thank you. The intent on that section was to capture a couple of items, including environmental impact, and more broadly in the small Roman numeral 4, determine not to proceed with a project as sort of an overarching ability for the town to determine that the town does not want to proceed. So the intent of this agreement is to get us to that point where we can make that determination, both the town and Presidio.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that, but the way it's written, whether we do it or not, it's just an observation by me. It looks like not to proceed is in conjunction with an identified environmental impact, the way it's written. So, and I may be absolutely incorrect about that, but that's how it struck me when I was reading it.
So I think if the ultimate motion were to incorporate allowing some latitude for the staff to adjust the language in that particular item, we could take a look at that and make some adjustments to keep the intent.
Thank you.
We certainly can add that to make sure it's clear, but as Mr. Morley stated, that last one is the catch-all. Yes, usually you look for environmental reasons or findings to deny the project, but it's still, you can proceed maybe because of financial reasons or because you don't have community support, and that's always the case with this type of agreement. But we can clear that up to make sure it's clear, because it does talk about the PFA, so there could be some changes we could do to it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, at this time, I will open public testimony on this issue. I have one speaker card at the moment. That is from Ray Triplett. And Mr. Triplett, when you come forward, if you could just identify yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Go.
Thank you. Is that better? Did you hear the beginning, or do you want me to repeat it?
Actually, because we are being recorded, it might be worthwhile if you don't mind starting from the beginning.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Ray Triplett, and I'm speaking from 3 perspectives tonight. As a lifelong member of our community, a parent of children who attended both the Los Gatos Parent Nursery School and the St. Mary's Grammar School, and as the owner of the commercial building at 16 Linden Avenue, all of these are directly affected by the proposed garage and housing. Over the last 8 months, a group of other concerned citizens and I have attended meetings with the parking committee and with various staff members, and we have voiced concerns and requested that public outreach begin immediately. I have the following specific concerns regarding the proposed agreement. The first is in recital B. I believe that this section should be made fully transparent regarding the redevelopment agency's requirement and 2017 deadline that the town provide a plan for below market rate housing units on the site. If the town does not include housing, either the redevelopment agency will take ownership of the site, or the town can spend $2.1 million to buy the site as is. I believe these are material facts and are a factor in the financial motivations and pressure to include housing in the desire to have more parking in downtown Los Gatos. My second concern is in recital E. Because no public outreach has occurred yet, without public input to date, I don't see how this agreement can state as a fact in this legal document that the, quote, the project has generated enthusiasm from a broad range of community members. While this statement may put a positive spin on the agreement, all the people I have spoken to, while interested in more parking in the downtown, have significant concerns, including the safety of the school children, overcrowding, traffic, and the sheer scale of the building required to include 20 to 24 housing units. Those who have already voiced concerns include both the principal of St. Mary's School and the pastor of the church. Together, they represent over 2,000 families in our community who have yet to be heard from. My third concern is section 2.5. The developer is put in charge of the eventual community outreach. I believe that our elected officials and town staff should represent the community's interests on this vital part of the process. And finally, section 2.6, while it is appreciated that the developer is agreeing to be sensitive to the neighbors in designing the plan, I believe this agreement should also state that the City Council will also be sensitive to the neighbors when it votes on this issue. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to reach conclusions and plans that are in the best interests of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Triplett. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll close the public testimony, and I'll look to our council for further questions. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. These will be questions of staff, probably Mr. Schultz, but possibly Mr. Morley. I want to go through the issues raised by Mr. Triplett and get input as to how and if we should modify the potential agreement. Starting with paragraph B, there was a request that we expand the transparency with regard to RDA. Staff input on that. I mean, as a member of the committee and a member of the council, I personally would not have an objection to that, but what's staff's input?
We certainly can expand it. B is a correct statement of fact. There's no misstatement within that. But if you wanted to expand more for what we purchased it for and what requirements are made and what the town would have to put back in, you can. It's just, when do you end with recitals? It's supposed to give exactly what transpired. And you know, that would be totally up to council. We can expand it to provide more of what the exact agreement or transaction occurred back when we purchased it, but didn't think it was necessary. It won't change the agreement whatsoever, whether you do or don't.
What is staff's recommendation, if any?
I'm fine with the way it is right now.
Then with regard to subparagraph E and the statement with regard to enthusiasm, I believe that we have all heard concern or issues with regard to the parking garage. We have all heard enthusiasm. What is staff's recommendation with regard to modifying that wording?
So I think that particular item is correct as well. There's been enthusiasm expressed throughout the community. There is perhaps a point made that it doesn't, it does not include necessarily the skepticism that we've also heard. So that may be something that the council may want to consider. From staff's perspective, we're comfortable with the language as it stands.
Then with regard to paragraph 2.5 and staff outreach, we've talked about, staff and council has talked about the outreach being conducted by both staff and the developer, potential developer. What is staff's input on 2.5?
On this particular item, we made the bold assumption that staff would be very much engaged with the public outreach, and we really wanted to bring the developer in on that. So this is really the hook to ensure that the developer is committed and understands what the level of commitment is for this particular project. So it's really a focus on bringing the developer into what we envision being a very thorough public outreach process. It includes a partnership between the staff, the potential developer, and all of the stakeholders.
Do you have any objection to including the fact that staff will be participating in outreach?
We have no objection.
And then the last one, 2.6, developer cooperation and coordination. The request there or suggestion was it also referenced town council. Mr. Schultz, input there?
I think it's the same as the last one. We just assumed that town council would be sensitive to those neighbors' concerns, but we can add that in also, that the town will consider the neighbors.
It would be the town would do that.
Yes, along with the developer.
All right, so before I'm finished with my questions of staff, based upon the testimony and what I've heard here tonight from staff, I would leave paragraph B as is. I would change E as suggested. I would change 2.5 as suggested, and I would add town to 2.6. But I need to hear what everybody else has to say.
Council members, any further comments on that? Council member Johnson?
I need to know if that's a motion, and if it is, then I need to know the reference to, quote, as suggested, unquote. Is that by staff from your questions, or is that by Mr. Triplett?
I'm sorry, Council member Spector.
That was not a motion. I was interested in hearing what other council members have to say.
Okay, I'll go ahead and weigh in based on the comments that have been provided by Mr. Triplett. Thank you. I think there was an assumption that the council, as well as town staff, would be heavily involved in the creation and the outreach with this. I see no downside of having that stated explicitly in this contract. As for subsection E, changing the wording from enthusiasm to interest, I'm comfortable with that. I think overall what I want to iterate to all those that have shown interest, whether it's skepticism or enthusiasm, is that this is very, very early. We are talking conceptually. We have a location. We have some parameters because it is being purchased with RDA funds. But because it is very early in the process, there still is nothing to share because nothing has been created. And we welcome everyone's participation in that creation as we proceed so that we can reach a product that we can all be comfortable with, if not totally enthusiastic about. So yes, Vice Mayor and then Council Member Spector.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just make a couple comments. I guess I've been hesitating a little bit because I really don't consider myself a contracts expert, and this looks like a contract with, you know, the developer we're trying to start working with, and I appreciate that staff was trying to get them to do the things they need to do, and it isn't about letting everybody know what we're also going to do. It sounds like, I know others that have already spoken are much more contract experts than I, and they seem fine with adding the, well, town is also going to be involved, which we were going to do anyway, so I'm okay with that. Just on the first one, on B, that I think it's probably okay to leave it as suggested, although I think the point of the speaker was to show, because of RDA, we have some reason to be doing this. And that's what he was saying. You know, you're going to have to pay $2.1 million if you don't do this, or they're going to come take the you know, that's what he was asking for in here. But again, this is a contract, so that doesn't sound appropriate in a contract. It's more in a why we're doing something. So I'm going to defer to others on what the best things to put in the contract are.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will then go and make a motion. With regard to the draft, I would move to change the word enthusiasm in paragraph E to interest, as the mayor suggested. And then with regard to paragraphs 2.5 and 2.6, I would include the fact that the town will be involved in the outreach, and the town will be involved with the, in 2.6, developer cooperation and coordination with adjacent parcels.
I'll second.
Okay. Councilmember Jensen?
Would the maker of the motion consider adding language to section 3.1, broadening the language with respect to the town's discretion?
I'm being negligent today. Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm not prepared to modify 3.1 because I don't have a sense of how I would modify it. Not that I wouldn't, it's just that it's not an issue that I have any suggestions for at this juncture.
If I may, Mr. Schultz, do you have suggested language that could help clarify 3.1 for consideration tonight?
I don't, other to state that I would just add language to make certain that it's very clear that the town is retaining its discretion all throughout the process to approve or deny the ultimate project, and that this agreement in no way locks in the council to approve a project at this point in time. So I don't have the exact legal terms, but that's exactly what I would say, and I would recommend that we do put that in. Looking at it, I can see where there could be some dispute later on that we don't want to have.
Ready?
I just was going to suggest that we could easily add the phrase include but not limited to the items that are listed. So I think there's a way of modifying the sentence to broaden the intent of the discretion.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Then I would broaden my motion to include a modification to paragraph 3.1 as indicated by staff, to include wording akin to include but not be limited to further broaden the scope of that limitation on effective agreement.
And Vice Mayor as the seconder?
That's acceptable.
Okay. Any further comments? With that, I call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It does pass unanimously 4-0. Thank you. Okay, so now we are at verbal communications, and this is a portion of our meeting where anyone may speak on an item that is not on our agenda. At this time, I have one card for verbal communications, and that is with Miss Angelia Dorner.
In a sec. Hello, I'm Angelia Dorner, proud resident of the Almond Grove. First off, I'd like to thank staff for all of the work they've done since last council meeting. Spring into Green, Cat's Bike Hill Race, and the Great Race, and there's just been a lot of stuff going on downtown, and my understanding is that they all went really great. So I just have a few comments actually relating to some future items I just wanted to put out in front of you for consideration, which aren't going to be any good if I can't use my overhead. No. Nothing? There's really nothing that I can share with you without my overhead, so you really need to look at these for clarification. So thank you.
So then instead of holding up, what I'll ask, if Ms. Lombardo, if you could keep trying, and then at our next, we'll move verbal for you to speak, Ms. Dorner. Okay, so let's move to item number 11, our first agenda for our public hearing, and that is an ordinance of the town of Los Gatos requiring the license of tobacco retailers and adding section 18.60.020 to the town code of Los Gatos. So, and Mr. Schultz, I will turn to you, and if you may, I see several members of our youth commission, if you wouldn't mind introducing them as well.
Sure.
Or actually, I'll ask them to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight is the tobacco retail licensing ordinance. In 2016, the Town Council adopted amendments to the town's smoking regulations to prohibit smoking in the town's public spaces, including outdoor dining areas, entryways, public events, recreation areas, service areas, and multifamily residential units. It was a highly comprehensive ordinance that I worked on with the Youth Commission and then came forward to council. We're currently in the process of implementing that with signs and banners that the Youth Commission has worked in. And I think it was last month the Youth Commission even received an award for their work in that area. During that discussion last year, the council also directed staff to develop an ordinance to address the regulation of the sale of tobacco from our retail businesses in Los Gatos. And that's what we're here to discuss tonight, is that ordinance that would establish a tobacco retail licensing program. Tobacco is the #1 preventable cause of death and disease in California, killing nearly 40,000 Californians every year. In 2012, the Surgeon General report found that about 90% of all smokers first tried cigarettes as teens, and that about 3 of every 14 smokers continue into adulthood. Further, young adults ages 18 to 24 have the highest smoking prevalence among any age group, according to the California Department of Health. A recent report by the Center of Disease Control reports that nationally e-cigarettes use among middle and high school students tripled from 2013 to 2014. Studies have shown that limiting the ability to obtain tobacco and where it is sold can curtail the youth access to tobacco products. My office has researched practice in other communities and found that in the past 2 decades, more than 80 communities in California have adopted a tobacco retail licensing permit ordinance in an effort to reduce the illegal sales of tobacco to minors. The town attorney's office has also worked very closely with the county health department in drafting the ordinance and also with the youth commission. This ordinance will affect 27 businesses in Los Gatos that currently sell tobacco. The outreach that was done for them was 2 specific letters personally addressed to each one of the business owners, was sent to the 27 businesses. An informational hearing was held on this item also. We posted twice in Nextdoor. And then also last week, I personally contacted and went out to the 6 pharmacies that sell tobacco and also went to some of the ones that are close to the high school. So we've done a tremendous amount of outreach to our 27 retail tobacco license holders currently. The draft ordinance would require all retail businesses selling tobacco products to obtain an annual license and be subject to inspections. Additionally, the draft ordinance includes regulations that are crafted in a manner to reduce underage access to tobacco projects and establishes performance standards for these businesses that are consistent with those for retail establishments engaged in the sale of alcohol beverages. So it's kind of the way that communities are doing this is the same way that ABC regulates alcohol sales. Unfortunately, under the state scheme, the license that you obtain from the license is a very low amount, and it's a one-time charge that they charge tobacco retail. So there's very little inspections, very little of inspections and how they're operating and whether they are in fact selling to minors. So this is why most communities have developed such a retail tobacco license on their own. The primary components of this ordinance is, as I mentioned, that they will have to obtain a TRL for the town. However, I will be bringing forth at the next meeting the ability for the county to actually be the implementation for this ordinance so that the town doesn't have to undertake the staff time or the ability to do the actual license and inspection. So that'll come forward to you, that agreement, next meeting. It would require an annual license review. It would require an annual inspection of the premises for compliance with the requirements. It would make sure that all tobacco is publicly visible location. It'll prohibit the sale and transfer of tobacco products to anyone under the age of 21. It would prohibit a person under the age of 21 from engaging in the sale of tobacco. It would prohibit all self-service displays of tobacco products. It would prohibit the sale of all flavored tobacco products. It would prohibit the sale of any tobacco products in pharmacies, and that's why I personally went to the 6 stores that have pharmacies to let them know that if this was passed, as of January 1st, 2018, they could no longer sell tobacco products. It would also prohibit any new tobacco retailing to occur within 1,000 feet of a school, a park or a playground, or within 500 feet of another tobacco retail. These are new, though. The ones that currently exist would be grandfathered in. The only time it would change is if the ownership changed. So if the current retailer was within 1,000 feet of a school, currently they could continue, even after 2018, could continue. But if in fact there was a change of ownership, they would no longer be able to. And that's the ones that are within 1,000 feet or within 500 feet or another are approximately 16 of the 27 that would be affected by that ownership change. As I mentioned, staff is currently working with the County of Santa Clara that would allow the County of Santa Clara to administer the ordinance and collect the permit fees. Unfortunately, though, to be able to utilize the county and there are many other cities that they're in the same type of negotiations with. They require the ordinance to be all systematically the same, because it would be very difficult for the county to have, if it was 1,000 feet for us and 750 for Palo Alto, or maybe different terms and conditions for each different ordinance. That would be very difficult for the implementation. So if we do make major changes to the ordinance, then we would probably have to implement this ordinance by ourselves, which could be costly and time-consuming from a staff standpoint. With that, I think I'll finish my report up. The county of Santa Clara, Nicole Cox is here, so she can also, I'm sure she'll speak, and she'll also is available for any questions. She's very knowledgeable in this area. She specializes in it and knows the ordinance very well. And also, as you mentioned, there are members of the Youth Commission that hopefully will get up and speak about the ordinance, and I'm here for any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Schultz? Yes, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Schultz, it's not clear to me at this point. I have attachment 1 draft ordinance. Is that the one that you are recommending, or are you recommending some other iteration?
No, and that is it, although I did issue a desk item that did a couple of things. One of the letters received in opposition did point out that Penal Code 308 had been changed. It's currently illegal to sell tobacco to a minor, and it used to be even for a minor to purchase tobacco was an offense under the Penal Code. They deleted the section in 308 where it's an offense for a minor, so you can't be cited if you're a minor and you happen to purchase tobacco. They took that out. So the red line I sent today took that language out about Penal Code 308. It corrected it on page 1. The other change I did, I put some extra findings in the ordinance that are redlined in the desk item today that talked about menthol cigarettes, that showed the effects of the menthol figures that were taken out of studies. So that was the other change. And then the third change was paragraph 9. There were a couple letters. It was citing to paragraph 1 when it should have been paragraph C. So just very minor. They don't change the ordinance whatsoever from what you received Thursday. They were just minor corrections.
And so if we go forward with this, we are going forward with what you call the desk item that you did today?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Vice Mayor and then Councilmember Jensen?
Thank you, Mayor Sack. Couple questions, maybe an easy one to start with. So the nicotine chews that people buy to try to break the habit, are those still okay to sell at pharmacies? Because it's not really a tobacco product, right? It's a nicotine product.
Right. Correct. They would still be.
Okay, so second question, if I may, Madam Mayor. The part about the clerks under 21, why is that a significant thing to keep in? And if we remove that, would that be something the county would no longer be willing to enforce it for us if we remove that?
So it is part of the county one, and I'll let Nicole, when she comes up, speak to if there was a reasoning behind that. I couldn't find a reasoning behind that, and it is possible, I think, that we could exclude that item if we were concerned about that age being able to work in a convenience store.
Okay, a third question. So there was one point by one of the letters that we got that was interesting, that pointed out the state only recently raised the age to 21 for where you could get and buy tobacco. But then we've stated a bunch of data about menthol and all these other things helping to get younger kids into smoking. Does that sort of invalidate that data now?
I mean, you certainly could make that argument. I think from our standpoint, we're trying to be progressive, forward-thinking, and it's still out there. The menthol and the flavored cigarettes certainly are a big issue. All the studies, I don't think that changes it. It certainly might make it more difficult at age 21 than 18 as it was before, and that's helping. It's coming from the state. But the state has not restricted the use of the flavored cigarettes or the menthol cigarettes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jensen?
Two questions. One is a follow-up on Vice Mayor Rennie's question regarding people under the age of 21. I think well, I'm not going to speak for him. I had a concern that perhaps that meant that people under 21 couldn't work, for example, at 7-Eleven. But if I'm a server at a restaurant and I'm under 21, I can't pour alcohol, but I can work there. So are we assuming that someone could work there who's under 21 as long as they're not selling directly or handling the tobacco products?
Yes.
Okay. The second question is a technical question regarding change of ownership invalidating a grandfathered in retailer. So if I think about the 7-Eleven across from the high school, for example, is the change of ownership a corporate change ownership, or is it a franchisee? Because oftentimes those franchisees of things like 7-Eleven will change. So what are we considering to be a change of ownership?
The ownership from the retail license. So they would have to decide who was going to be the retail ownership when this is implemented in 2018, and the entity they pick at that time will be the entity that's moving forward. And if that entity was to change that had the license, then they would no longer be able to use it.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, a good example is maybe the 7-Eleven, if that's in an individual's name, they should think carefully about who they want to have as the permit holder. And Nicole could ask more, because I think the county has ran into some issues with that also when she gets up.
Any further questions, council members? Okay, so I will now open public testimony. Just a reminder, when you come forward, you'll have 3 minutes. The yellow indicates 30 seconds left remaining. And since they were referenced, I'm going to ask the members of our Youth Commission to come forward first. And if you could introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Tommy Seaman. I'm the chair of the Los Gatos Youth Commission. Throughout the year and past years, we've been working with Attorney Schultz on smoking ordinance amendments, and recently we're working on this for retail businesses. So I just want to express my support for this ordinance along with the other commissioners.
I'm Sean Muldrain. I'm also on the Youth Commission, and I second whatever Tommy said, everything.
Hi, I'm Sarah Mami. I'm also a member of the Youth Commission, and I will third what Tommy said.
Okay, hold up. Any questions, council members? Okay, well, thank you for being here tonight. I know it's a busy time for high school students, and thank you for all the work that you've done into this ordinance. So, okay. Nicole Cox.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and City Council, Town Council. My name is Nicole Cox, and I'm with the Santa Clara County Public Health Department. And just to answer a few of the questions that were raised, in terms of our stance on the age of the clerk, again, what Attorney Schultz said was correct, that they could still work at the establishment but not engage in the sale of tobacco. However, it is something that is negotiable for us if you feel strongly that that's a provision that you would like to see taken out of the ordinance. It won't negate our collaboration to help with to take care of the implementation of the ordinance. We do understand that there may be small businesses where they have family members who might be under age 21 that are working there, and it's difficult to have another person on staff. So we certainly understand that can be a unique situation, and we don't want to harm the business side of it. And then just related to the comment that was raised about the need for restrictions on menthol flavoring in cigarettes and other tobacco products, despite the age increase to 21 for purchasing, there still is a lot of targeted marketing that's happening to those that are even below 18, of course, and below the age of 21. And actually, the one of the letters from the NATO group mentioned a sale in the town of Los Gatos, and actually the record of that letter shows that the young person was actually sold a menthol, a Newport cigarettes. We did a similar study in Milpitas, and many of those youth were actually able to purchase menthol cigarettes. It's one of the most dangerous flavors in cigarettes. It is harder to quit. It has the cooling effect, so young people don't get that harsh response that you would get from smoking traditional cigarettes. And we know that youth are using menthol cigarettes in middle school and in high school. So it's still a real significant public health issue, which is why we sought to address it at the county level. And then in regards to the change in ownership, we haven't had a situation where we've had a 7-Eleven that has had a change in ownership. But again, we'd be happy to work with the individual businesses to provide some advice on their application process and work through that. And also we are working with our Small Business Development Center at the county to see if there's other types of resources that we can provide to businesses who may be seeing a reduction in tobacco sales. So I'm here if there's any questions.
Any further questions? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Sack. So one of the provisions is to effectively reduce the density around schools. And I think it was NATO or one of the others made the comment that really what you should be fighting is the adults that are delivering it to the kids. So by reducing the density, shouldn't that also help reduce the adults distributing to kids then?
I haven't seen studies specifically looking at the transfer from adults to kids, but of course, when there are less places that are selling tobacco in a community, you're going to have less access, both by kids going to the business themselves and or approaching adults that may be there to buy the tobacco products.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Ms. Cox. Riley Musser.
My name is Riley Musser, and I'm Vice President of Marketing and Merchandising for Rotten Robbie gas stations. We have 34 locations in the Bay Area and one in Los Gatos on Los Gatos Boulevard. I'm fourth generation in the business, and we've been in retail since the 30s. I grew up in Los Gatos, and I'm currently a resident. I know that tobacco is an unpopular product. I'm personally not a smoker, and I don't want my kids smoking, but I oppose this proposed tobacco ordinance. The statement that existing retail licensing laws and practices are insufficient in reducing underage smoking is false, and this proposed ordinance punishes local responsible retailers. The convenience store industry takes tobacco retailing very seriously. We have a good record, and we certainly don't want to sell to underage consumers. California has had 2 major changes in tobacco in the past year, both of which help to curb underage smoking and smoking in general. The legal age to buy tobacco increased from 18 to 21 in June of last year, and there was a huge $2 a pack tax increase on cigarettes last month. Rotten Robbie's carding policy is industry standard, and we take it very seriously. We card anyone that looks under the age of 27, and we take an extra step of hiring an outside service called bars to regularly perform internal stings at store level. Our cashiers are bonused every time they pass an internal sting. If the cashier does fail a state sting, they are charged with a fine and a misdemeanor, and the company is also charged. We don't want to sell to minors, we don't want to be fined, and we don't want our cashiers to be fined by the state. The industry also has a good record. The FDA's compliance inspection report for the last year shows that Los Gatos tobacco retailers had a 3.7% violation rate, or 1 fail out of 27 total stings last year. The FDA also released its initial findings of its tobacco and health study last year and found that the majority of underage youth get tobacco from social sources, meaning older friends, siblings, and parents. The study confirms that retailers are not part of the problem. Lastly, the proposed ordinance punishes local businesses and puts Los Gatos retailers at a competitive disadvantage. It encourages consumers to go a mile or 2 down the road to San Jose or Campbell. I encourage you to put aside any personal dislike you may have for tobacco and support your responsible Los Gatos retailers and oppose this proposed ordinance.
Looks like you have a question real quick, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. So I don't think I got from your discussion what specifically which part of the ordinances would hurt Rotten Robbie? Do you employ people under 21? Are you closer than 1,000 feet? Is Rotten Robbie a franchise? Which parts specifically are what really bother you?
We typically have one person on duty. They're not close to a school. We're on Los Gatos Boulevard, down the road a ways. But we have one person on duty, so that person would obviously have to be over 21. There have been multiple cities that have tried the flavor ban. We feel like we should be able to offer, all types of cigarettes. We feel like we don't sell to underage minors or underage people, so.
If I could follow up, so maybe you're not the right person for this question, but the way menthol, I'm not a smoker, so I'm going to have to try to guess, but it seems like adults typically wouldn't buy menthol. It's more the younger, starting off people that would buy menthol. So are you really selling that much menthol? If menthol was removed, would it really hurt you that much?
It depends on the area. We definitely don't sell a lot of menthol in Los Gatos. But in other areas, it's definitely a seller. It's not a top seller, though.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. David Weissman.
I suspect that most of you are too young to remember what happened in 1991 when this council first revisited the smoking ordinance. It was going to be doomsday for the bars and restaurants. Outsiders came into Los Gatos and called Councilman Steve Blanton a nicotine Nazi. But the town council held steady. Our retail outlets survived. Restaurant revenues went up during the recession, and the state followed our lead 2 years later. And in 1998, that big tobacco settled with the attorney generals of 46 states, agreed to pay out $206 billion over 25 years, and then they saw their stock prices go up, all while admitting that they were selling nicotine delivery systems and lying about it. So big tobacco is now back in town, as evidenced by 2 letters submitted yesterday. But big tobacco is still using their old deceptive scare tactics: black markets, bankrupt businesses, litigation, etc. And they continue to distort the record. For instance, 36 attempts at buying underage cigarettes in 4 years in Los Gatos is so paltry that the American Lung Association consistently gives Los Gatos a D grade. And Mr. Duffy from Glendale, Arizona, says a recent article demonstrates that that locating tobacco sales an increased distance from schools is inconclusive in showing decreased effectiveness in cigarette sales. What he doesn't say is that this article that he cites from the journal Preventive Medicine was from 2008, which is a lifetime ago in this field. I'm surprised that the 2 letters from Big Tobacco don't argue for bringing back lead in paint and asbestos in insulation. Some 10 days ago, a San Francisco supervisor introduced an ordinance to ban the sale of all menthol cigarettes and flavored tobacco to everyone, period. Why? Because according to the CDC, 90% of certain ethnic groups prefer menthol cigarettes. And menthol is believed to make the harmful chemicals in cigarettes more easily absorbed by the body, while concurrently making such cigarettes more addictive. So who are you going to believe? Disingenuous letters from people paid by big tobacco fronts or healthcare providers and hospitals? The latter actually lose money when people stop smoking because they require less healthcare. Yet they support these measures. I urge you to pass the proposed ordinance and follow the lead of the Santa Clara County supervisors.
Quick question, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Weissman, I know you didn't mention it in your talk, but I know you're very well read and have just studied this quite a bit. So again, I guess one of my biggest concerns is the clerks having to be 21 years of age. I can imagine, people graduated from high school, they're not going to college, they're trying to have jobs. Why is this important to limit it to people 21? You think that they'll give it to their friends more easily, or is this really significant?
I would suspect that could be part of it, selling to your friends. I suspect that at a Rotten Robbie, for instance, would you really want to have someone under 21 being there late at night by themselves?
Well, it's not just late at night.
Well, I think things are, there's a certain amount of danger involved with a Rotten Robbie or a 7-Eleven late at night.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Vice Mayor, any further? Okay, any further questions? Thank you, Dave. Dr. Weissman. Carol Musser.
I'm not quite sure. Maybe I have a few questions. My name is Carol Musser, and I'm a longtime resident. And thank you. And I'm pleased to see all of you. I just maybe have a couple of questions, because maybe now I'm not sure of what you're trying to do. Like when you're saying about prohibiting selling like the menthol in certain cigarettes, is that just from youth or the general public, just to stop selling them totally?
And Ms. Musser, what we'll do is after we close public testimony, all the questions that you're asked we'll answer through deliberations, but we won't be able to do it during your time.
Oh, okay, because then it kind of affects like what my thinking is, but then, because I'm still not quite clear then if you're trying to just stop selling or whatever, because my overall premise is this, I just want to make it simple. I don't support you having your ordinance. I just think it's another whole layer of bureaucracy, which, you know, you're finding fault or putting the burden on retailers when, again, they have the laws for youth not under 21 are not buying it. They're, no matter what, people are going to make their own decisions. It's like with alcohol. There's other issues. Then you could do the same ordinance with alcohol or donuts or Coke or coffee or wine or beer, the same sorts of things, and now you're targeting this one particular issue. Just think it's another layer of bureaucracy that maybe isn't needed, because there have been so many strides in the youth in our community, as you see, and the awareness has been brought up so much, and I think businesses are being self-monitoring too and are very prudent in their decisions and what they do. I just cannot support that, and I hope you really think through it seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Any other speakers for tonight on the smoking? Okay, please, if you could come forward, identify yourself, and then afterwards fill out a speaker card. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Manpreet Singh. I own that MJ Market on the street. Yes, please. My name is Manpreet Singh. I own the MJ Market on the street, and I'm against of the ban on menthol. Like she said, let the customer decide on what they want to buy. Like they like to buy menthol cigarette, or they want to buy Slurpee or other things. So that's not the right idea. Like you're putting, and same time you're putting the burden on the retailers, they will be out of business. So many people will be jobless if you guys keep doing this. It's very hard to pay the bills. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Any other speakers for tonight? Okay, I will close public testimony on this portion and look to council members if there's any further questions of staff and or comments, and ultimately a motion. Yes, Vice Mayor.
I'll just ask the question that Ms. Musser was sort of alluding to, and I'll ask it and, confirm my understanding. So currently you can't sell to minors under 21 anyway. What we're saying is, or what's being kind of said through the report, is sale of menthols are getting to those under 21, and it's particularly bad because it's easy for, the harshness is gone. It's easy for them to then get into smoking. So that's nothing can be sold to minors, but menthols seem to get through to minors somehow. Either maybe they're buying it or it's being traded. So our purpose for, do I have it correct on what our purpose for eliminating menthol is?
Yes, as Nicole Cox said, that there still is marketing for flavored cigarettes, and menthol cigarettes are targeted toward the younger audience, and the studies all show that that's where they start, is with flavored cigarettes or the menthol cigarettes. So the ordinance, if passed, would, as of January 1st, 2018, the retailers would not be able to sell flavored cigarettes or menthol cigarettes.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Schultz, if I can also clarify my understanding, all other cigarettes can continue to be sold to those people over 21, but what's different is that there will be now a permitting requirement on an annual basis that the county would also monitor.
Correct, with the one caveat, though, the businesses with pharmacies would no longer be able to sell cigarettes at all.
Okay.
They would be prohibited entirely.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Maybe I meant to maybe ask that earlier. So you went and you got a lot of feedback from businesses. I'm not sure you really told us what their feedback was. So what specifically, what did pharmacies say about that?
Not a single one was opposed to it. They said they had received the letters that management had sent it up to the corporate offices, and they hadn't heard anything back on preventing it. In other towns and cities that have eliminated cigarette retail sales in pharmacies, San Francisco, we have a list of different cities. So I think the corporate is kind of heading that way to begin with. One of them was Lenardi's. Has a pharmacy, but they last year when they did their remodel, stopped selling in all of their stores. So I did not get any feedback from anyone that said that they were going to come and oppose it. I did hear from some of the ones that were within the 1,000 square of the schools, and I think their biggest complaint was that the staff report said that the fee would be in the $400 range, and for that much it might not even be profitable to sell, meaning to me that they weren't having that much in sales in tobacco to begin with.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, any comments or a motion? Yes, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is not a motion, it is a comment. When I read the information provided to us by staff and coming from the Youth Commission and all the other input, it seemed straightforward to me that it would be something to approve. In listening to the testimony relating to whether or not all of the people who sell cigarettes should be over 21, and whether the flavored cigarettes should be totally banned, specifically the menthol. I do have concerns and questions, and I am looking to hear what others have to say.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
So I'll just add a few comments. Since I'm the one that keep asking the questions about the 21, I don't think I got a good response on either side, other than me worried about it. I didn't hear anybody else really worried about preventing people from under 21 selling it. And when I asked the question of why it was needed, I didn't really hear a very good answer either, so I'm still sort of on the fence with that one. I heard the county say we could remove it and they'd still be willing to implement it, so I'm on the fence on that. What I read about the menthol, Ms. Spector also mentioned the menthol. What I read about the menthol really seems like it is a key hook to get into the younger generation smoking. So I think that's an important item to leave in the ordinance. I don't think I would want to take that out.
Any further comments? Would anyone like to venture into a motion? Yes, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We'll see how this goes. I'm going, and I am making reference, when I talk about ordinance, I am making reference to the desk item, the red line desk item that is noted as attachment 3. With that in mind, I'm going to move an ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos requiring the licensure of tobacco retailers and adding Section 1860-020 to the Town Code of Los Gatos entitled Permits for Retailers of Tobacco Products and/or Electronic Smoking Devices, with the caveat that I would exclude that provision that mandates that the people who sell have to be over 21.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
I'll second.
Okay. Any further comments? Okay, so I'll just weigh in. I will be supporting the motion as is. I understand the concern, especially from small business, regarding the elimination of menthol and flavored, but focusing just on the scientific studies that do indicate that it is a hook for the younger segments and the advertising that's directly impacted towards them, I do think this is an area worthy of further elimination. I'm supportive of the idea that 18-year-olds can sell, understanding that oftentimes there is just one person there, and if that's an 18-year-old or a 19-year-old, day or night, it would be a hardship for the community not to be able to sell. So with that, I'll be supporting the motion. Any further comments? And Madam Councilmember Spector, we also need a motion for our clerk to read, introduce, and do a first reading of the ordinance by title only. Yes, okay. So I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? It passes 4-0. Yes, Councilmember Spector.
And Madam Mayor, with regard to the title, are you looking for a motion?
Yes, please.
Then I'm going to move that we have the clerk read the ordinance by title only.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? None. And Madam Clerk, if you would please do the first reading.
An ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos requiring the licensure of tobacco retailers and adding section 18.60.020 to the Town Code of Los Gatos entitled Permits for Retailers of Tobacco Products and/or Electronic Smoking Devices.
Okay, thank you. And so with that, that does close to that portion of the hearing. The second reading will be at the next meeting. And at that time, it'll just be second reading with no further discussion, and I'm looking to staff for confirmation of that.
Correct. The second reading will be on the consent calendar. It could be pulled, but it'll be on the consent calendar at your next meeting.
Okay, thank you. We now move to item number 12, and that is to adopt a resolution to reaffirm the town's commitment to a diverse, supportive, inclusive community and to protect the constitutional rights of its residents, workers, and visitors.
Madam Mayor,
yes.
it appears that we've been able to have
our
the
screen is
overhead
now okay.
work.
Thank
So
you.
if you'd like, we could go back to verbal
I
communications.
would like. Thank you for that. Ms. Dorner, would you like to do your verbal communications now?
Angelia Dorner, still a proud resident of the Almond Grove. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to use my overheads. I have two items that I would just like to put out in front of you for consideration and thought over the next couple of weeks for yourselves as well as for staff to consider including some of these items in staff reports coming up in connection with our budgets. This thing just popped into my head. This has to do with the annual slurry seal street work. The bid just came in on the 20th. I did not have an opportunity to see the bid yet, but it should be coming up for communication to you all. 26,000 square feet of these 6-inch digouts are on Los Gatos Boulevard, which is a substantial portion of the cost, and this cost is I'm using from last year's bid. The reason why I bring this up is I looked at all of these sections on Los Gatos Boulevard, and the majority of them are in the high 60s all the way up to 80, except for the two sections which are Churco to Lark. So this popped in my head about what is the status of the resolution we did last March concerning using 28 credits for undergrounding utilities from Lark to Churco, and thought that that could be communicated in the staff report. Also, for consideration is, does it make sense to spend this much money rehabbing this particular stretch of LGB? Because I would imagine that those are the parts that are going to eat up the majority of those 6-inch digouts based on the PCI, especially if we have that kind of a pending project in the next couple of years. The other item I started to address in one of my earlier comments. But with this, I really just wanted to focus on the staff costs that were shown in both the annual street project as well as the curb project that you approved earlier tonight. If you look at the staff costs for the annual street work, $291,049 for the sidewalk, total of $340. I looked at the town engineer salary ranges, which is $133 midpoint, and that was from the March 4th, item 4. Added 25% for employee benefits. So essentially we're saying that we could be using 2 town engineers for 100% of the year annual salary-wise on projects that only last 3 to 4 months. Plus, on top of that, we've got $330,000 each year of the 3 for Almond Grove. It just doesn't make sense to me that we've got that level of staff costs on these particular projects. If you think about the top number, that would be 1.2 million or 1.3 million of staff costs on an annualized basis. And then you add the Almond Grove, which would cover 6 months, which would be close to another 900,000 or 600,000 of staff costs for 1 year. That just seems unreasonable. So I'd like to hope that we could get some explanation on that during the budget talks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And as with these questions, as indicated, these are upcoming items, and if so, take those into consideration for further questions in your staff report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we move to item 12, which is a resolution, as I had mentioned. And Ms. Pravetti, do you have a couple of comments you'd like to make?
Thank you. The item before you is consideration of a resolution to reaffirm the town's commitment to a diverse, supportive, and inclusive community and to protect the constitutional rights of residents, workers, and visitors. This item is coming to you from the Cities Association. One of their work plan items for this calendar year is to develop a statement that could be adopted by all cities within the county to affirm protection of all persons. A subcommittee was formed by the Cities Association Board, and there was consideration of already adopted resolutions, and what the board decided was to create a more neutral statement to really affirm and support that our communities are inclusive of all persons. The only modification that has been tailored to Los Gatos is to broaden the resolution from only mentioning residents to also include visitors and workers because of our diverse population. And with that, staff is available to answer any questions that the council might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pravetti. Are there any questions on this item of staff? And I have no speaker. I have one speaker card.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. Good evening. Actually, I'm going to read a letter that my husband wrote, and he's busy tonight, and besides that, he hates to come and speak before the commission or the council. So this is to the mayor and the council. Having read the resolution proposed by the town of Los Gatos, I was not only disappointed, but distressed. Having lived in Los Gatos for more than 40 years and being well aware of the policies on many issues, I have kept a sense of hope that Los Gatos Council would, on the balance, make decisions that are in the interest of Los Gatos citizens and all others within the broader community of man. As a longtime Los Gatos resident and Hispanic, the neutral tone of the resolution is distressing. I note that other communities and associations have not been so neutral in their resolutions and declarations. By being neutral, Los Gatos has made a political statement rather than a declaration of concern for human rights. I urge the town council to be on the side of all citizens and make a clear and concise statement of Los Gatos values. Be clear on the town's policy concerning immigration law enforcement. I also wrote a letter, and since I have time, I will read it, and I will also my printing was in red, but when it got copied, it turned to brown or gray. I support this resolution with the inclusion of a few minor edits and one modification. The edits are on the board above. Basically include the verbiage of human rights into the title and into several other places within the document, and then requesting that an additional bullet be added that addresses the immigration policy. Deportation is specifically mentioned in the whereases of the draft resolution, but it has no corresponding space under now therefore be it resolved. And I would like to see that issue added in some general way. Again, by not including that kind of a statement, it is a political statement not to include it. Neutrality is a political statement as well, so I don't particularly agree with that issue. And also, we have no definition of what the town's current policy on immigration and the use of town resources to enforce immigration laws.
So, Ms. Quintana, I do have a quick question to make sure I understand the attachment that you've edited. So I understand the first two, and actually in adding equitable, it says here move last bullet up as first bullet. Are you talking about the second bullet that's at the bottom?
I had my clerical help, i.e. my husband, collate this and put it together, and he left out the second page of the resolution. It's the last bullet on the second page.
Got it. Okay. Vice Mayor?
Let me read the last bullet and make sure it's the one we're talking about. It says the town of Los Gatos will promote safety, a sense of security, and equal protection of the Constitution and human rights, leading by example through equitable treatment of all by town officials and departments. That's what you'd like first.
Yes, because I think that is sort of a summary of what follows.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? And if I understand all this, also your comments and your edits, by raising that bullet that was just read by Vice Mayor, you'd also like that to be included in the title, which...
Exactly. There were a couple of places. What I stated in my letter but didn't include in my edits that I would have some verbiage for including reference to the town's policies on using town resources to enforce immigration law, and I decided not to put that in, but to leave you the option of how to phrase it if you should choose to.
Okay. Any further questions of Ms. Quintana?
And I still have the question, is what is the current policy?
Okay. Any other speakers for tonight on this item? Seeing none, I will close public testimony, and I will ask council members if they have any questions of staff. Okay. Yes, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try a motion. I'm going to move to adopt a resolution to reaffirm the town's commitment to a diverse, supportive, inclusive community and to protect the constitutional rights of its residents, workers, and visitors, and that resolution to be modified as presented to us by Ms. Quintana.
Okay. I'll second the motion. Any comments or questions? Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. And if I may, Ms. Quintana, if Ms. Provetti, if you wouldn't mind, there was a direct question on police enforcement. If I can ask our interim chief or either you to just convey that offline. Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor?
So I assume we're moving on to item 13 now?
That's correct.
So out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from that item. I have future, whatever you want to call it, I will have future benefit from PG&E stock that is currently held in my aunt's probate from her estate, which could be considered a conflict of interest. So I will recuse myself from this item.
Okay, thank you very much for that caution. Yes, Councilmember Jensen.
So procedural question to our attorney and our town manager. Can we proceed with 3 people? Do we have a quorum, and is the vote will result in less, what potentially could be a minority of the council voting for something?
So you can proceed because you do have a majority of council here. You have a quorum, but you will need a unanimous vote of 3. A 2-1 would be a no vote, and we'd have to continue it until we could have our 4th member, Council Member Leonardis here.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Vice Mayor. See you at the next meeting. Okay, so we are now to item 13, and Director Morley.
Thank you very much. This is the consideration of an appeal of a Parks Commission decision to uphold a tree removal permit for trees in the public right-of-way on Winchester Boulevard, adjacent to 17274 Vedas Robles. The applicant is PG&E, and the appellant is Vivek Correa. Mr. Correa was not able to be here tonight. We corresponded with Mr. Correa multiple times over the last several weeks, we being me and the town attorney. With little response. I finally received response today letting me know that he was not going to be able to attend. So we won't have input from the appellant on this particular case. In summary, this okay. So in summary, PG&E has a program where they are managing the vegetation above their high-pressure gas lines. PG&E has worked with the town for well over a year to identify what that vegetation looks like and to put forward a plan for removal. PG&E is mandated by the PUC for safety to advance this particular program. And the town has worked with PG&E to do the implementation. PG&E went through the permit process per our town code. They paid the appropriate fees and then some. The total fees were approximately $23,000, and PG&E paid closer to $30,000 or a little bit more for the project. And that was for mitigation of the trees that were to be removed. In this particular case, all of the trees have been removed with the exception of 20 trees and adjacent to Mr. Correa's property. PG&E has been working with Mr. Correa to try and implement this, the removal of these trees, which happen to be planted directly on top of the high-pressure gas line. The trees are relatively young redwoods in general, but there is a tree list within your packet that you've had. The Parks Commission made the finding at their last Parks Commission meeting to uphold the permit based on the trees interfering with utility services where the interference cannot be controlled or remedied through reasonable modification, relocation, or repair of the utility service, or the pruning of the root or the branch structure of the tree, or where removal of pruning is required by a public utility to comply with the Public Utility Commission, CPUC, or Federal Energy Regulating Commission for rules or regulations. And that was, per our code, there is a finding that needs to be made, and that was the Parks Commission's finding for this particular item. PG&E is here as the applicant and can provide some information as well, and to answer the questions on the specifics of this particular effort. And if you have additional questions, staff is available as well.
So there are questions. Councilmember Jensen and then Councilmember Spector.
A question, and depending upon the answer, a possible motion. Before anyone who's interested in speaking, and I'm assuming that they're essentially PG&E representatives, but is it possible to make a motion to continue, given the fact that the appellant is not here and the public hearing has been opened, or do we have to go through a public hearing and then continue and have a vote, or even if the council thought it was appropriate to continue this, given the fact that the appellant is absent, what's the proper procedure to do that?
So council certainly has the ability to do a motion to continue if it feels that that's the direction it wants to go. Let me explain a little bit on how we got here and why we're here and why staff didn't feel comfortable on setting this for a different day. Is the code section that we're dealing with the removal of trees and right-of-ways is a fairly new section that we, I think, adopted about 2 years ago, and this might be, I think this is the very first appeal that's come to council. It's heard by Parks Commission, which is a little different, and then it's appealed to the council. It doesn't state in that ordinance how many days you have between the appeal and when it comes to council. But we do have other code sections that talk about a 56-day window between when it's heard by the lower body and appealed to the council. So I made a determination, even though this code section doesn't have that 56-day period, we still need to stick with it. Using that 56-day period, we could only have the hearing either today or our next meeting. The appellant said he could not make it to this one, and I said, well, we have to have it on this one because our next one has universally always been just on budget and anything else. So if you are going to continue it, you only have the next one to make that 56-day period, which I think is important, so the applicant doesn't have the ability to state that you know, the time limit has passed for appeals to be heard under our code. So that's the dilemma that we were under when we heard he could not make it and we stuck with this day, was because if you move it all the way to June, then you're past the 56 days. So that's what you have to wrestle with. Is it okay to hear it at your next one? And I don't even know if the appellant is available at your next one because he was not clear on when he would be available.
Okay, thank you for the answer. The second part of the question was when, if a council member wanted to make such a motion, when would that be appropriate to do? Could it be made prior to the receipt of public testimony?
Yes, it could be made prior. It could be made post also.
Spector?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This goes to these issues that I have discussed with staff earlier today, and I just wanted to ask the questions publicly. I wanted to clarify for myself whether the trees that were proposed to be removed were designated or deemed an unacceptable risk or a manageable risk, because I was trying to balance what was being asked of us by PG&E and by the appellant. And what I've learned from staff, and I want to confirm, is that all of the trees that are suggested to be removed under this appeal are all deemed unacceptable risk.
That is correct. All of the manageable risk trees are being managed and watched over time.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
So then I'll also put a question that I asked of Mr. Schultz earlier on the record, which is page 3 of our staff report. The last paragraph says, well, it's in the context of PG having voluntarily agreed to go through our process. However, then it says in our staff report, quote, however, in this case, issuance of a tree removal permit is non-discretionary. The town does not have the authority to deny the request at the staff level or upon appeal. So my question was, if it's non-discretionary, does that mean what it says? And are we engaging in a process that essentially becomes meaningless? Or what's the basis of the statement in the staff report that indicates that it's non-discretionary?
So as the staff report mentions that PG&E is regulated by the PUC and they have the authority to regulate the location and vegetation for the transmission lines. So that is put in there in the sense that, yes, PG&E was not required to obtain a permit from the town for the removal of these trees in the right-of-way in which they have an easement that allows them to be in that area. PG&E voluntarily agreed to go through our process and our town ordinance. And once that began, and by following it, that means the trees were posted, which technically they didn't have to do. But when they did that, and then we received the opposition and the appeal, we couldn't just stop it and say, now you're not allowed to appeal. So we went through that process to this appeal. Now, do you have discretion? Maybe that word could have been worded differently. You certainly have the ability to deny the appeal or deny the application and uphold the appeal if you can find that they don't meet the findings that are listed in the staff report regarding the safety issues. If you do that, what's the ramification of that? PG&E will do one of two things, and hopefully they do what I would want them to do, is go to PUC and get an order that allows them to remove these trees, and the town can't stop them. They could just go ahead and remove them themselves, and we could try to stop them through a court order. Or the worst case scenario is they don't do anything, and then there could be a safety issue that could happen at this location, and it would be, the liability would fall on us. So although you do have discretion under our permit to deny it, in reality, it wouldn't be like that's the final say, because there's someone else that has jurisdiction over this that's a superior jurisdiction.
Councilmember Johnson?
Just to follow up to that, then since PG&E voluntarily agreed to go through our process, they can withdraw that voluntary nature of that participation at any time and choose to rely on the state regulation through the PUC, correct?
Correct. I think what PG&E has learned, though, is, and I think they're doing this in many communities, is they're trying to do that outreach and community involvement to know exactly what they're doing instead of just removing trees without any of these public hearings. I think that's where the philosophy has changed within PG&E, because for years they didn't do any type of meeting local regulations, and PG&E could answer, why would you go through something you don't have to? That would be best asked to them.
And I have two questions. The first, again, looking at the documents available to us, the trees are actually on top of the pipeline, I guess. Is that the correct verbiage? And it's not a matter of a safer distance away. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's right on top, I think, is probably open to interpretation, but within a very small distance of being on top of the pipeline. And I think PG&E will be able to address specifically what their safe zone looks like.
Okay.
In this particular case, a lot of the trees, I think if you look at the drawings, a lot of the trees are right smack on top of the pipeline.
And the second question, because they voluntarily went through our process, they would also have to pay into our tree mitigation fund. And does the town have discretion on where those replacement trees can be replaced? Is the first, and I'm seeing nods for confirmation. And so the second is there an ability to work with the appellant to provide the screening that was one of the criteria of his appeals? Has there been any discussion on providing some screening as a replacement?
So PG&E has worked very closely with the appellant on providing options on the appellant's property in order to provide that screening, and certainly PG&E can address that specifically. The appellant has not been interested in that for a number of reasons. I think their property is currently landscaped, and so that may preclude the additional screening along there. PG&E may have more details because the private property side we left for the discussion with the applicant. I do know that there were multiple discussions and offers on mitigation for the applicant. In terms of what PG&E contributed to the town, there were 39 trees applied for removal. The replacement requirement for that is 78 trees. Obviously, they're not going to put trees back where they just took them out for safety reasons, so they pay into our tree fund to the tune of the requirement was $19,500 for the replacement trees. PG&E wrote us a check for $30,000, so in excess of what the requirement was for additional mitigation, and those are all at the town's discretion on where those trees are planted.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, so our appellant is not here, so I will ask the applicant. I have a card for Darren Klein to come forward. You'll have 10 minutes. You've heard some of the questions already, and
Sure.
If you could just introduce yourself officially on the record, and then you may have 10 minutes.
Hi, my name is Darren Klein. I work with Public Affairs with PG&E. We do have a quick presentation so that we can help give you some perspective. So, what we're doing, just real quick on the program, is that we are checking the area above gas transmission pipelines. Just so you know, gas transmission pipelines have to be made of steel. They are of a PSI that is 60 PSI or above. Your car tire is at 30 PSI. This is much higher, and it is, because of that, it has to be made of steel. We are not looking at distribution lines or service lines, so it's very limited where it is in Los Gatos, and mostly it's on Winchester Boulevard. What we're doing is we're making sure that first responders have quick access to the pipe and safety, that what we've done, and the simplest way to say it is, we have looked at our pipe very differently in the last 5 years, and we have done a lot of things to make that pipe safer. And so what we've done is we've pressure tested. We have set up a 24-hour gas transmission center in San Ramon, which monitors all of our pipes and all the pressures in our pipes. If there's a change in the pipe, then we can rapidly shut down a pipe and send people out, depending on the leak or what the status of the pipe is. We do that because we need quick response in case of an emergency. As we've been doing this work over the last 5 years, we did notice that we were not doing a great job with vegetation. So we went and we have been going to each community, and the reason that we have been going through the process is that we found that every community is not the same. Monterey is not the same as Los Gatos, is the same as San Francisco. So to figure out what is the mitigation and what works for cities when you are replacing trees, well, a lot of cities already have ordinances in place. So we wanted to go through the process, figure out what's right for Los Gatos when it came to mitigation for these trees, and figure out a way to work together so that we can keep the nature of your neighborhoods and the foliage there. So we are planting trees or working with the town to plant those trees. So what are we looking for exactly? Well, this is an ideal world. This is what's filed with the CPUC. We would love to have within 5 feet of the pipe just low profile grasses, no trees whatsoever. That's the pipe safety zone. 1 to 2 feet is the kinds of trees that we are talking about tonight. Those are all within 1 to 2 feet of the pipe. With 5 to 10 feet, we're looking for bushes, things that don't have a woody consistency. Because when we look at the risk that a tree poses, it is not just first responder access. There's a whole host of issues that go into and creates a rating through our integrity management system. At 10 feet and outside, that's where we like to start to see trees. Crepe myrtles within 10 feet, oaks are better at 14 feet. You are looking at some issues where there are tree root issues. These are gas transmission pipelines. That means they have cathodic protection on them, which is a low-level current that makes sure that the pipe doesn't corrode. That creates issues because we also pack that pipe in sand because we're in earthquake country. That presents perfect conditions for tree roots because you have a colder pipe, you get condensation like on a glass of tea, and the water attracts the roots, the nice sand, loamy soil attracts the roots, and you have a problem when it comes to root interaction. So we look at those different things, and we realized that if we were to come through every community, this would be called clear cutting. And that's not realistic. So as we looked at that, that's when we came up with the system of saying, in an ideal world, we'd like this, but we can live with keeping manageable trees within 10 feet of the pipeline so that we're not changing the nature of your neighborhoods overnight. So we put in our tree-by-tree review. And our tree-by-tree review was put together by gas safety experts, but also arborists, okay? So when we created the whole, what does the tree-by-tree review involve, we're looking at tree characteristics, the species, distance from tree to pipeline, potential for root interaction. A majority of the trees that we're talking about tonight are redwoods that are directly over the pipe. So a lot of people say, well, that's great because the tree roots don't go down real deep with those. Well, it does create a problem with first responder access. It also creates a problem under site conditions where it does create some issues with soil erosion. When redwoods fall, they have a tendency to pull the pipe, pull the soil. So there are other issues that happen with roots if they don't even come in contact with the pipe. We take all of this information, pipeline depth, et cetera, put it through our system, and that's where we come up with the unacceptable trees and the manageable trees. Now, we also realized that trees are a very emotional issue, and that for us to just come through, we need to be able to communicate. So we did meet with the town. Well, first off, when it comes to franchise, we came and met with the town in 2015, and then we talked about what were franchise trees, or trees that are along the streets, and then we looked at private property trees. For example, on Winchester Boulevard, on October 15th, we mailed letters out to private property customers, including Mr. Correa. We went out and scheduled meetings with every one of those. We had one-on-one meetings with them, and we came to agreements as to what they would like to see happen with trees that are in and around their property. Mr. Correa has trees on his property that are all manageable. We did have some issues communicating with Mr. Correa, so our communication, which did start here, had to stop for a little while. But we were able to start communicating with him again. What we did on franchise was there are trees that we have removed. We did mitigation based on all of the trees being removed, so all mitigation has been done. We started mailing gas safety newsletters in May of 2015, and again in April of 2016. We mailed letters, we made phone calls, and we canvassed. We literally went door to door, knocking on doors. It's almost like what you would be used to in a political campaign, because we realized if we don't have that one-to-one interaction, that's when we have problems. At the time, we did not knock on Mr. Correa's door. Unfortunately, Mr. Correa had threatened to kill some of our workers, and then he had threatened to kill himself. So we had a discussion with our internal security team as to what would be the best way to proceed, and that is what has led this to here tonight, where we sat down with the city, we met with the attorney, we did a survey of the property, we came to agreements with everybody living around all the other trees that we have removed in the city, and we came down to this last piece of land. We have had success with everybody. It is just Mr. Correa that we have had the issues with. And as we had said all along, we would only remove a tree if the people around the tree agreed to it and we could come to an agreement on mitigation. So that's kind of the quick version of what we've been doing and how we've been working with the city, or with the town, sorry. And if you ever want to know where our gas transmission line is, you can go online to pgne.com, gas safety. Our biggest problem is dig-ins, people just digging. We ask that they please call 811 before you dig. Part of the reason that we are going through this process of making sure that we're doing enhanced mitigation, we're actually using shareholder funds, we're not using ratepayer funds, is because we realize we haven't done a great job with vegetation. Now what that means is technology changes. A long time ago, we purposefully grew shrubs and bushes over the line because that was our gas leak detection system. You saw some bushes dying, it was leaking, you'd go and replace the pipe. Now we have cars that drive by and sniff out gas leaks and call in experts that then come in and fix the gas leak. Much better to do it that way than any other way. We used to tell people to plant trees over the line. Why? Because we thought it prevented dig-ins. Turns out it increases dig-ins, because as trees fail, pass away from natural causes, people are digging those up, planting trees directly over the pipe, and we were having people damage the pipe at that time. So it's all of those issues that we're looking at, and we wanted to make sure that we could come and talk to everybody, make sure they know what our reasoning is, what our thinking is, and to be able to ask any questions that the community needs to know. And we're here to answer all of your questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Any specific questions of the speaker? Yes, Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you for your presentation. I just have a couple questions. One is, how old is the line that we're talking about on Winchester?
The line in Winchester was put in the 50s. The usual question that goes along with that is, yes, the trees were not there before the pipeline. They came after the pipeline. And the pipe itself will live a pretty long, happy life underneath the soil there for 100 years or more.
Okay, actually, that wasn't my next question.
That's okay.
My next question had to do with the town's ordinance, which the Parks Commission considered and made findings that the interference with the line cannot be controlled or remedied through reasonable modification, relocation, or repair of the utility service. So I'm just curious whether or not there was an exploration of, trimming roots, moving the pipe from the 50s, and whether this is an economic decision or whether this is, well, I'm assuming that this program comes out of San Bruno. So I'm just curious as to PG's thinking about a reasonable modification, relocation, or repair.
Yeah, we are talking about the transmission system. This is not distribution or anything else. So when it comes to the transmission system, we are overseen by the federal government and the state government. That gas transmission line is perfectly safe right now, exactly where it is. If we were to move that pipeline, the amount of environment that we would disturb, we would have to go through a 6 to 8 year permitting process. And we feel right now the risk of those trees over the pipeline, because we're trying to be very proactive here. We're not trying to be, it would take too long to even move a pipeline. If we could get it approved by CPUC, it would take a long time to move that pipeline. So it is easier, and it is a great opportunity for us right now to keep the pipeline safe, because we don't have time to move a pipeline or something like that, and the disruption to the environment. We have looked at, you talk about tree roots and tree root barriers and stuff like that. These trees are directly over the pipe. The concern is we want to be able to remove the trees, make sure that the roots aren't growing or anything like that, so that they won't interact with the pipe. We don't want to go down and start digging up a pipe. It makes it unstable, the soil unstable. We found that this is the safest way to keep the pipe safe. And with that, we make sure that we offer the mitigation that is expected of the community that we're in. On the electric side, that is a ratepayer funded program, so when they go and do vegetation work, there is no mitigation at all. That is because it's under a ratepayer system. It's CPUC governed. Right now, we have the opportunity to do what's right for the community, and that is why we have these funds available, and they have to be shareholder funds. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. This will probably turn into a ratepayer funded program at some time. CPUC will mandate that. And our gas transmission system, even though it's just on Winchester Boulevard, it's actually part of a 6,750 mile system that has to be managed in a very broad way. Like, we have to keep 4 days worth of gas within our pipeline system, so it's actually a storage system as well as a delivery system. So looking at these macro levels, they don't want us to move that pipe. They want us to keep it safe.
Okay. And the only other question I have for you, with regard to the mitigation, if it sounds like you'll pay into our fund, and then once you've paid into our fund, it's now the town's discretion to decide how to.
Yes.
Okay. So
yes,
then.
And we had that specific conversation.
Okay.
Where it was, please put it where what is best for your community and your environment.
Okay. And any further questions of? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Klein.
Mm-hmm.
Next speaker is Angelia Dorner. No? Okay. So with that, there were no other comments, so I will go ahead and close the public testimony and look to council for any further questions of staff and any comments and or a motion. Yes, Councilmember Spector.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was thinking that you were going to jump in with a motion. but you didn't. So, having made that observation, I am going to move that this town council uphold a tree removal permit for trees in the public right-of-way on Winchester Boulevard, adjacent to 17274 Verdes Robles. And that's the motion, but I would be willing to consider an amendment to that motion that includes, may include discussion of where those trees, any replacement trees or trees would be placed. But my motion stops at Verdes Robles.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. So we have a motion as well as a second. Thank you. And in terms of discussion, I would defer to our staff to work with the appellant on how best to use that mitigation fund. Without the specifics of that discussion, I'd rather just put the money in reserve and see how best to address some of those privacy issues that were raised during the appeal. Okay, with any further comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And it passes unanimously 3-0 with Mayor Rennie recused and Councilmember Leonardis absent. And that closes our hearing for tonight. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.